All right. Let's see. I've got some announcements to make, and I'm sure if we can find the right people, we can get a cooler to turn on in here. But I can't identify anybody that works here. One thing I want to say, my good friend Jim Piper has come up with a good idea. There's a lot of films that have been made in Russia recently. And so he's going to do a Russian cinema since Glasnost, which will be at Fresno City College. And it's going to be October 4th. The movie Private Life, directed by Yuli Rosman. What is it, every Friday night? Every Friday night in October. There'll be Private Life and then A Forgotten Tune for a Flute. The Commissar, Little Vera, and so forth. It says here, foreign films show me how people ordinarily live, how they pour coffee, how they feed infants, how they step into their underwear, and how they quarrel, and how they step out of their underwear, how they make love. Is that right, Jim? All right. If the films are worthy, the life they portray seems more real and typical to me than, say, media glamorizations of mobs of Russians standing up to tanks. I wanted to know more about former Soviets on an everyday, unheroic level, so I turned to their films, especially those produced since 1985, when Glasnost resulted in the lifting of many historic restrictions, probably forever. He says, I found these films robust and interesting, so much so that I thought the community would like to see them. Thus, this little festival. So I think that ought to be a good one. There's a few more here. Jim's very imaginative. I like the way he writes. So things like that. I think it's important how people get in their underwear. Find out a lot about things, you know. Just the way a whole nation is, maybe. Okay. On October 3rd, that's next Thursday, it's going to be Omar Salinas and Dixie Salazar, better known as Dixie Lane, Fresno's own Dixie, and the great, incredible, crazy gypsy Omar Salinas. Then on November 7th, Gary Soto and Steve Gutierrez. I'm really anxious to hear Steve read some prose. That's going to be a fun night. Tonight, you know, I introduced Robert a number of times, and I have introductions that I've written for him. I've lost them. I pulled them out of 2-3 weeks ago, and they got lost. And I woke up last night thinking I had the right thing to say about Robert. I wrote it down. I woke up this morning, and it's completely unintelligible. Anyway, there are few poets I enjoy more than Robert Vasquez. He really vitalizes my appetite for poetry. He is unusually resourceful and gifted at finding opportunities in whatever material to abruptly separate the mind from its world of impediments and things as they seem. His poems can turn so quickly and strike with dramatic power. What is irrelevant is thrown off in a way that elevates and empowers the experience. His poems have that formative impulse that identifies locations, relationships, and material, identifies them with such genuine response and perception that doesn't alter what it perceives. The effects Robert gets in his poetry defy analysis, and I could go on and on as I have before, but let me just say that Robert is from Madeira. He worked at he worked full-time for many years in less than ideal jobs while earning a BA in English from Cal State University, Fresno, where he studied with Peter Eberwein and Philip Levine. He received an MFA from the University of California at Irvine, where he also taught composition and creative writing. He spent 2 years as a Stigner Fellow in poetry writing at Stanford University, where he won his 3rd Academy of American Poets Prize. He has also received awards from the National Society of Arts and Letters, the National Writers Union, and just recently, the San Francisco Foundation's 1991 James D. Phelan Award for the best unpublished manuscript by a native Californian. His poems have been published in various periodicals, among them the Los Angeles Times Book Review, the Missouri Review, Plowshares, and Village Voice, as well as several anthologies, including Piecework, 19 Fresno Poets. He has a new work forthcoming. Boy, I really want to get my hands on it. You got a new work coming, forthcoming in the journals New England Review and Parnassus, and an anthology after Azatlan, Latino Poets of the 90s, to be published by Boston's David R. Goudin, formerly a lecturer in creative writing and composition at the University of California at Santa Cruz. He is currently teaching composition full-time at College of Sequoias in Visalia. Happy to have him come up here and read. Leonard just got here from Modesto. We're going to give him a rest. Come on up.
I was about to take off my watch, and there's a built-in timer here, so. And I've been told that out of this door there appears a cane and takes you away when you've gone on a bit too long. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Are you there? Are you breathing? How about now? Yes? Thank you, Chuck. I was hoping to be pinned. Generally, they have a microphone. They pin around me? Oh, we don't have anything. Oh, why is it that? I seem to remember that. Only what? It's only for us. Well, I thought maybe, I could experience what it feels like to be going steady with someone, right? So someone pins something on. Let me start with a poem by someone else. I might as well give you at least one poem that you can go home and say, well, at least you read one that I liked. This one is by a favorite poet of mine. Her name is Elizabeth Bishop. She died in 1979. She lived for many years in Brazil. And so I also want to read this because my fellow teacher at COS, one of them is here, and she just moved from Brazil. Her name is Valerie Ehrlich. Anyway, this poem is called In the Waiting Room by Elizabeth Bishop, and I'll try and recite it, and if I tend to forget, then obviously I'll look, or I'll cheat. In the waiting room. In Worcester, Massachusetts, I went with Aunt Consuelo to keep her dentist appointment and sat and waited for her in the dentist waiting room. It was winter. It got dark early. The waiting room was full of grown-up people. Arctics and overcoats, lamps and magazines. My aunt was inside what seemed like a long time. And while I waited, I read the National Geographic. I could read and carefully studied the photographs. The inside of a volcano, black and full of ashes. Then it was spilling over in rivulets of fire. Osa and Martin Johnson dressed in riding breeches, lace boots, and pith helmets. A dead man slung on a pole, long pig, the caption said. Babies with pointed heads wound round and round with string. Black, naked women with necks wound round and round with wire, like the necks of light bulbs. Their breasts were horrifying. I read it straight through. I was too shy to stop. And then I looked at the cover, the yellow margins, the date. Suddenly from inside came an oh of pain and Consuelo's voice, not very loud or long. I wasn't at all surprised. Even then I knew she was a foolish, timid woman. I might have been embarrassed, but wasn't. What took me completely by surprise was that it was me, my voice, in my mouth. Without thinking at all, I was my foolish aunt. We were falling. Our eyes glued to the cover of the National Geographic, February 1918. I said to myself, 3 days and you'll be 7 years old. I was saying it to stop the sensation of falling off the round, turning world into cold, blue-black space. But I felt, you are an I. You are an Elizabeth. You are one of them. Why should you be one too? I scarcely dared to look to see what it was I was. I gave a sidelong glance. I couldn't look any higher. At shadowy gray knees, trousers and skirts and boots, and different pairs of hands lying under the lamps. I knew that nothing stranger had ever happened, that nothing stranger could ever happen. Why should I be my aunt, or me, or anyone? What similarities, boots, hands, the family voice I felt in my throat, or even the National Geographic and those awful hanging breaths held us all together or made us all just one. How, I didn't know any word for it, how unlikely. How had I come to be there? How had I come to be here like them? And overhear a cry of pain that could have got loud and worse, but hadn't. The waiting room was bright and too hot. It was sliding beneath a big black wave, another and another. Then I was back in it. The war was on. Outside in Worcester, Massachusetts, were night and slush and cold. And it was still the 5th of February, 1918. I always liked that poem. I always feel as if I'm speaking, as if I'm this little girl, which may say something about my sexual orientation, or lack of it. Let me read this poem, which is, in a sense, sort of related to Bishop. She was one of my influences. And this poem is, in a sense, influenced by her, I think. It's called Catechism at the Doll Collector's House. Like some of you, I too was victimized by the Catholic Church and sort of made to go to this place where we had catechism. I respect the Catholic Church. I mean, I'm just kidding. They're a wonderful business, organization, whatever you want to call it. Catechism at the Doll Collector's House. Oh, and there's a reference here to Mrs. Holly. Mrs. Holly was the black woman whose house we used. This was on the west side of Fresno. So I always thought it was rather odd that we lived, or I should say we went to catechism in a house owned by black women, yet all of us were either Hispanic or I think there was one Asian. Anyway. We were herded, some dragged, down Lotus Street to the house of unblinking glass eyes, the glass of insomnia. Dolls ruled everywhere, on shelves, underneath end tables, silent committees packed in closets, all clean and cool-eyed as the nuns who hushed our mouths. This one's my favorite, Mrs. Holly once said, and pointed to a shy Dutch farm girl, her left eye missing, her tight wooden shoes filled with straw and glue. And in the language of staring, which the nuns mistook for prayer and blessed me coming and going, I confessed to that one blue eye that the first wafer placed on my tongue I chewed, that the figurine of Mary, found broken and buried under a sofa, lost her head beneath the rocker's wood, curved like a Persian sword, that was swung by the weight of my small buttocks, and I did not confess. So many witnesses who couldn't scream. Raggedy Ann's mouth was black thread, zigzagged and perfect. The foreign legionnaire stared out over the sand in the fishbowl and tried to forget. Even the ballerina, lifted up in the bathroom, suffered my clumsy self. Urine missed the bowl and spotted her white lace. A clown in polka dots, her sad witness. I sprinkled lily dust to hide the stains, the odor of powder already laced throughout the rooms, the only evidence in the house that someone else could sweat and smell like me. I've noticed as I've gotten older that I tend to write more about women, the women who escaped my life, escaped from it, were smart. And this is a love poem. It's called Paper Diamond. It's for Julie, out there somewhere. Paper Diamond. The hours all April wind and sunset. From your high bedroom windows, we watch his kite spool out and waver and strain as we did moments ago. The blue percale lightly soured from our lovemaking. And you're troubled, not by the dragon addicted to wind and tethered to patient 10-year-old hands, but by yourself. A woman whose son can take a hint and go test the blown acres of sky above alfalfa. And what of me, whose desire barely tugged can crazily climb, who can witness this pain even while loving? Tell me of a kite that doesn't signal longing or loss, whose paper diamond doesn't bless the sky and link sad earth to heaven, mother to son, or you to me. Something the wind can take. Thin wooden cross, tail of linen, twine, waits to be reeled in, snapped, or simply released. Let me shift gears here. Read a poem about cows. It's called Milk Faith. And by any chance, do any of you remember those drive-in dairies where you could drive your car through and get milk and so forth? Yes, some of you, yes. Thank you, John. Thank you so much. Excellent. You want to just... And I lived as a child nearby one of these dairies. In fact, Some of you may know Dwayne Rail, and I think he may have worked at this drive-in dairy. Anyway, it's dedicated to Dwayne. Called Milk Faith. Eric the Swede knew how to treat those bulls. They had their own minnowed water troughs and pens filled with their own beloved smack. All day they stood and stared, complete with squalling halos of flies, alone with their milk faith in glands, each one mapped in white and black. Cousins steamed up the stalls long before stainless hookups became the ganglia of the place. Those well-bred teats would swell like huge counterweights, all that liquid worry building up via hay and 4 stomachs. Grace of a kind, the farm kind, that wells within the great veined bags. They were fat girls and stank, sired by those 3 ear-tagged dolts. The city-edge Guernsey farm at milking time was all iron in the air. Neck bell notes. Alfalfa music, it still lags somewhere, wall-eyed and warm. I realize that bells are made out of other material than iron, but I needed a rhyme. That is a rhyme poem, believe it or not. And it rhymed with another word. And as I was looking through the collection here outside, I was reminded why I wrote one poem. The later Ernesto Trejo had asked not only myself but asked others to write a poem about the Day of the Dead, what it meant to them and so forth. And so I wrote this, and this is the only poem I've ever written that's sort of, I guess you could call a poem for a specific occasion where someone asked you to do that. And so I wrote this one. For some reason, a lot of people seem to think that I am an autobiographical poet. I believe in creative writing as opposed to recreative writing. Though I love to use first-person narrative because I like to feel as if I'm speaking. And I mean, I have to use my imagination because my life is incredibly boring. And you laugh, but you haven't taught English for a while. Or even worse, suffered through a lot of seminars as a student. The speaker in this poem, I envision the speaker to be Malcolm Lowry, wrote a great novel called Under the Volcano, which they made, Robert? John Huston made into a film, adapted the text. I know that the end thing today to do is to just read, or I should say, look at the film, right, and say, well, I saw the film, so I don't have to read the text. But in fact, the novel is terrific. It's terrific. And I steal a couple of lines, as well as a dog, out of his text. It's called Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. Okay. November. Zinnia's late in lifting from toward, I'm sorry. Let me start over. Yeah. November. Zinnia's late in lifting toward nightshade. A boy I know plays dead, unaware of the blood orange nimbuses that sweep by. Heaven withheld from a face partial to rain, and squalls of color at sunset. When porch lights turn mothy, his father will whistle him in. This kid who can shake off death like so much grit and grass at evening's end. House lights will blink out, and mothers will take fathers to bed, and a child nuzzling sleep will hear cries, which might be the groans of the dying or the groans of love. And I'm the neighbor, gone loveless for years and walled off by eucalyptus and brick. I'm the silent one, drawn to bonfires, those in alleyways and in the sky, who finger traces the flame lights that blew and smoke out, leaf upon leaf, star upon star. I must become flame-like, to go beyond buck-tooth fences and horse stalls and a horse's neigh. I must inchworm my way up a cindery path, believing the dog star will yield its back and ferry me across the blue-black fathoms. I'd like to think that heaven's long acres are scored with roses, island roses, belled open by the bees, with their true appetite for all orders that bloom. And it's dedicated to my sisters, 3 sisters. At 15, shaving by then, I passed for 18 and got in. In where alcoves breathe with ill-matched lovers, my sisters among them, who masked and spun out their jagged other selves. I saw the rhythmic dark year over year discharge their flare. They scored my memory, adrift now in the drifting place. Often I watched a slow song empty the tabled sidelines. Even the old poured out, some dragged by wives, and traced odd box shapes their feet repeated. Plenty and poor, thoughts that rose as the crowd rose, my sisters too, in the smoked air. They rise on. They say saxophones still start up Friday nights. The loud, troubled notes wafting out from where I learned to lean close and groaned into girls I chose, no, took, and meant it. In the Rainbow Ballroom in Fresno, I sulked, held hands, and wheeled among the deep-bodied ones who reinvented steps and turns, turned fast or slow. And this body sang, man to woman, song to song. Thanks.
About a month, I guess. I don't teach at Cal State University, Chico. I'm sorry if I gave you that impression. I teach at what one professor at City College referred to as Butt College. Actually, it's Butte, but it's spelled B-U-T-T-E. And this was in Madera about a couple of weeks ago, and she introduced me. She says, here's Leonard Adame teaching at Butt College. So, but somehow that reminds me of Fresno State. I don't know why. Anyhow. She was embarrassed about that. And I said, don't worry about it. Some of my best friends are butts, so she got embarrassed. This little book was put out, God, I forget how many years. Gary Soto edited this, and entitled, maybe you've seen it somewhere, along Olive Avenue in those used bookshops way in the corner, you know, and nobody sees. Anyhow, it's called Entrance for Chicano Poets, and myself and Omar and Soto and Ernesto Trejo are represented here. And I found this quite by chance, as a matter of fact, on my way up here. And I'd like to read a poem in homage to Ernesto Trejo. It's called Tonight This House Speaks. Tonight, this house speaks to me through the creaking in the cupboards and the refrigerator's humming. Believe me, when this house shakes under my feet, it isn't because of the train. There's something in the basement. I don't know what. I've never been there. I'm afraid of that empty room that leads to it. What's the matter with these walls that multiply the screams of ambulances? Tonight, I'm a hearing machine, Coors bottles against Wesson oil, against wall and floor, against basement. Thank God the water faucets go on at 2. Then I sleep, and the peach trees get their water full of sounds. Here's an old backwash. Some of you may, somewhere in your lives, have heard this wonderful anthology was put out by the English department, ostensibly the English department of Fresno State, but actually it's put together by students. And I'm trying to remember who the editor, Randall Stewart was the editor of this. I remember him. I didn't remember him. Yeah, he got mad at me because I took $100 from. Actually, what happened was a year or two before this, I edited Backwash. I got to brag a little bit here. And I won 3rd prize in the nation for small press books. And I didn't know this, but that happened in the spring, and then I came back in the fall, and there was a $100 check made out to me in the drawer. And Randall had had his eyes on it for a long time, and he says, sign it over to me. I said, why? I is my money, man. So anyhow, he got mad at me, but he did put out a nice anthology. All that by saying that, unfortunately, and to understate the entire situation, another friend of mine passed away recently, Michael McGuire, and I'd like to read a poem in memory. It's called A Day Making. On this clean morning, after a night's rain, opening the dirty, screenless kitchen window, giving the whole east side of the house up to that light. I don't want to make poems anymore, unless the words burst like that, a light with their own weathers, seasons, or say some secret thing about the silence they try to fake, the place of their nation. When I moved to Chico to teach it, but I misplaced my my other manuscript, and it just happens that I found the one I turned in for the master's program over here at over there, you know where. And luckily I found this. I don't know what I would have done. Anyhow, I'd like to read a couple of poems from this. I'm not sure which one. I'll read the first one. That makes it easy. I wrote one. Gary and I were sitting around. Gary Soto and I were sitting around. Before he got rich and famous and making films and stuff, we actually sat around on Divisadero and Van Ness and behaved like normal people, which meant drinking a lot and wishing we were someplace else. Well, we both got our wish, I guess, but be careful what you wish for and all that kind of stuff. Anyhow, we were sitting around writing poems, and I wrote this, and he seemed impressed with it, and he liked it, and I kind of like it now. It's an old poem. It's got to be 13 years old, I guess. And it's entitled. This one was one of the ones I was fortunate enough to have published in the American Poetry Review. It's called La Verdad, and I dedicate it to Pablo Neruda. Not much. A pot, water, petals of flame, pinto gems, coriander, bacon pearls, a few hours of morning or evening, not much. The bone skin of the pinto gives in the small storm of the pot, sheds, darkens the clarity from the faucet, lets go the coriander and bacon smoke. New broth in the earthenware. The spoon enters, cradles the pinto children, beds them in the embrace of maize. Not much. This poem appeared this is one that Chuck referred to in Literature, Structure, Sound, and Sense. One of those thick books full of poems no one reads unless you take an English class. And then they make you read it. Anyhow, I made $200, so that was good. It's called Black and White, and at that time, I guess it's Zimbabwe now, right? At that time it was referred to, well, actually it was, the country was Rhodesia, of course. And it's called Black and White. And I should give you a little background, I guess. I had gotten the idea from an article I read in the paper, and the picture that accompanied the report. It's called Black and White. Rhodesia, sweaty flank of the world. I read as quietly as they lay. Guerrillas, it went on, put here as a lesson. They lay like a catch in the plaza sun, still damp, the eyes not yet clouded, the African heat raising the bellies. It is the way of our generals to count what is theirs, what is done in their name, the secretary announced. From their circle, photographers stare and snap at the dead men, at the keyboard of rifles above their heads, at the small town that leads to the jungle's edge. They snap and freeze it all, store it in the silent world of black and white. Here's a poem that I wrote when a person by the name of Buckley was around. Some of you may know Buckley. I think I forgot his first name because we always refer to him as Buckley. Chris, is that right? Chris Buckley, yeah. That's true. I mean, we always call him Buckley. We never call him Chris. I don't know. It just seemed natural, I guess. He's the type of guy that would come out in Animal House pictures, you know. And he's got a great sense of humor when among friends, but among the public, he just kind of clams up, you know. It's incredible, but he's a fun guy. Anyhow, I don't know why I told you that, except that I wrote that poem around the time he was here, this poem. And this is about Fresno, I guess. And now that I'm not in Fresno, which is strange too, and wonderfully liberating. I'm sorry. Anyhow, this is called Recurrence. Summer recurs and finds, as usual, one or two of us more worn than is customary. Flowers tire of saving face. Snails avoid the heat. And the intermittent madness of eases away from the dregs of spring. Heals slowly in Porterville, where wounded psyches become official. Another, in the paradise of Santa Cruz, awaits word that he'll survive another year, that the 5 allotted to him will somehow multiply to become a lifetime. Summer recurs, and Fresno, from a short distance, ripples drunkenly, submerges into viscous heat. Another, don't do that, man, it's unsettling. I just watched Terminator, you know, and see a little red light there. Zap, yeah. Terminator is very poetic, by the way. You should. I mean, Arnold is. There's no one more poetic than Arnold. I mean, it took him years to learn that way of speaking. You know, I was in Montana playing in a band and playing country music of all things back in 1872. It seems. Can't believe it's been that long, you know. But over there it was 1782. Anyhow, it's not that funny. I met a woman in a bar, which happens in bars, I guess. And she was a Sioux woman, and she came to this place just about every night. We were playing 6 nights a week. Anyhow, this was, 72, I guess, and there was a time when there was lots of flooding in the Dakotas, and her sister happened to be, I think in South Dakota, and she came up, talked to the band, we sat around, and she, for about 3 or 4 nights, she hadn't heard from her sister during the flooding, you see, and so she was extremely worried. And so I wrote a poem. I was touched by her demeanor at the time. And I call it The Error of Rain in Me. It appears the flood has taken your sister. No tears from you, no curses. Worse, no questions. Daily I ask if you've heard. Evening, in dim light, Sioux blood glows through your eyes. Your face leans toward the log fire, and I see I am wrong. You've not spoken of pain, yet at times you soften, and it is there flowing like water beneath clear ice, quiet like a mountain burned, trees laid aside, a fish landed. Again by the fire, whiskey swirls with our breath. Your father's blood, only in the two of you, you say. And we hear the rain on the road, on the river, on our heads. As it turned out well, let's put it that way. One of my favorite painters, if not, well, close to being my favorite, is Georgia O'Keeffe. And I think she's incredibly underrepresented in the annals of art history. Not only is she a great painter, she's a great writer. I mean, I read her stuff, and she's just incredibly articulate. And I don't know, she strikes a chord in me, a nerve in me, to be corny about it, that sometimes I can't explain. But then that's okay. It doesn't have to be. Anyhow, I dedicate this poem to Georgia O'Keeffe, and it's called Stillness. Sleep odor stales the wrung sheets, discourages the blue grin of the Picasso on the closet door. The third Monday of August enters, its aura stone gray, the must of repetition on its breath. I lie still. A steer skull hovers above me. Bird squawks and car fumes from the window, the curtains straight as bars. I lie still. Remember the dream. Listen to the habit of the clock. Sleepscape of poppies and bone-white sand. The window, fond of equity, invites the cause of the landlord and lets them fall like shards. I lie still. Magueys and orchids luminesce. More voices through the insipid window. Cigar smoke, weak shadow. The mailman puffs and delivers the inevitable, his key at the boxes like an insect. I lie still, the dream trying to be remembered. Coffee scents the land, and the dusk submerges, glistens like coral from a southern sea. I lie still. By the way, is Robert still here? He took off. He knows when to leave. He mentioned he had an interesting comment that he's more into creating rather than recreating. And well, if he were here, I'd say they're the same thing, but he ain't here. Nevertheless, I created this, and I was going to dedicate it to him. This is called Wreath, and again, I don't know where it comes from. I just entitled it Wreath. November the 9th. I walk through the small autumn in the park, follow a peacock toward the green bronze someone named Hero. A foot of blue candle weeps in my hand, the flame tonguing the wet air. The funeral I'd been to, the shawls long, many, headstones thick as porch steps, the wreaths upsetting this dingy 9th, fades like daylight. I remember Anna, the stew she made on days like this, her skin after a bath, the times I returned 3 weeks late to find her ironing my shirts. I remember Anna, Anna alone with the wreaths on the 9th of November. The park, her favorite, quiet as an old nest, takes in the fog, the last of a covey, one who walks in the gray dream christened November, the dream in which fog dissolves the sun, the candle lit for Anna, the smell of wreaths and damp earth. I wrote this poem. I discovered this manual. I was madly searching for something to read tonight, and I found my old manuscript. And this poem I hadn't read in years, and I hadn't seen it in years. But I'll read it anyway. I wrote this for Phil Levine's class. I won't tell you when. Phil would want me to tell you when. It's called Prayers. And I numbered the stanzas, and I'll just say the number. 1. Hello, God. This is me. I haven't felt your eyes lately. My daughter asks why. 2. I slept with my grandmother in your book. I listened to her cough and mumble rosaries every morning. What were you considering? 3. Listen, God. My daughter asks me, where am I going? I lie and say to work. And at work, in the county's tomb, the clank of airlocks, the rusted toilets, the pacing, the naked women drawn with cock in hand, the hours of lead, all of this thickened my tongue, made me shiver in blankets, made my balls shrivel when asking, where am I going? 4. And God, when I was small, I stepped on bugs and kicked Paul, who died at 8 from a hole in his heart. 5. And once, I screamed, crippled bastard, at my crippled brother. When my father heard of this, his eyes died in me, and his voice still gnaws within. How much time is left there? Robert took up everything, so whatever. Okay. Gary and I have taken a number of trips up, Gary Soda, and we've taken a number of trips up 99, and actually one time I put all the stuff in my brother's van and we moved them up there. That was what, God, that was 75, something like that. Moved into Berkeley. And anyhow, I took another trip when he came back one time, and we were sitting around John Weinberg's place, I think, and all of that's kind of meshed in this poem. It's called The Need for Honor, and I've dedicated it to Gary Soto and John Weinberg. The night before, despair and the realization all of us will self-destruct, hung in the room like bad breath. Earlier, in a place of late sunlight on a young woman's legs, we ate smoked meat and fish, rice from an ebony bowl. We left burping like new fathers, joking that the woman would turn us all down. Back home, the refrigerator emptied a second time. We drank again, sat on the lawn, gave thanks the heat hadn't attacked today, that the evening wind was a blessing. As it darkened, the need for honor, poetry, the university's fat salary, jazz, ambrosia, the tidiness of a film well done, the certainty that sex should always be available. The need for all of this we discussed like lawyers at a settlement. How much of it is ours by virtue of our art? How much because suffering and despair favor poets? How much because we think ourselves at least as good as Bellow or Pearl Buck? We drank more as a cat sniffed his balls, the car, a rose, our legs as we justified drunkenness, the desire to leave our women, to leave love in search of a freedom we define as not having to lie to those we like to bed, not having to appease pedagogues. Quiet loomed in after this, the background jazz, long since over. Now, on 99, hungover and on our way to class, we talk of how Philly will beat LA, curse the radio because it can't find the Giants. The old Ford, its engine, a lesson in faithfulness, flows steadily toward Merced, Delhi, Turlock, Modesto, toward cherries and apple juice, toward the last chance to stop for a piss and a few long, dusty gazes at girls in shorts glowing like fruit in dusk light. The Diablo Hills fill the windshield. We pass beneath 680, channel through to 17. Mercifully, we get by Oakland's grime and Berkeley's simulations. At last, Albany and the poet's home and family appear. We never did get the Giants on the radio, nor did we talk to the lovelies in shorts. We shot the bull, ate oranges and cherries, forgot about the gutted tires on the road, the ragged manifolds, the small towns lost in a dream of mold and packing sheds, the dull, our wives, the wish to be understood, the philosophy of ether. Forgot about the truckload of aliens who, like us, believe they are heading to something better. We just forgot about it all and shot the bull. That was a while back we did that. I have a poem that's recent. Actually, it was written for the reading I did for the 16th of September celebration in Madera. And I kind of revised what I had then, but I'd like to read it. It's entitled Wise Nopales. And those of you who don't know what nopales are, they're cactus. And the ones that grow the fruit on top. And what you do is you chop off the new growth, and you scrape off all the spines, and you chop them up, dice them up, and you fry them, and you can eat them a number of ways with meat or eggs, or and they're also an aphrodisiac, so we eat a lot of them. No, they're not. I'm just kidding. Anyhow, this is entitled Wise Nopales. Once again, like an Aztec omen, the 16th has arrived, its smoking plumage still bloody, still snagged with the skulls and singed gritos of the revolutionary dead. And once again, we are like ghosts searching for what we couldn't find in life: freedom and equality, libertad y igualdad. Ideas as elemental as meteors and corn, stars and magueys. Ideas that haunt the centuries, that run from soul to soul like beggars, scavenging for a home, for a people unafraid of taking them in. Freedom and equality, libertad y igualdad. We should make sarapes with them, drape them around our sun-worn shoulders. We should make tortillas with them. Taste the earth and her stone-flecked kernels. Feed them to our children with Quetzalcoatl's wise nopales. And smile as they grow strong and long-lived. As they celebrate like spirits that have finally encountered peace in a universe free of skulls and omens and gods who feed on our deaths. Here's another poem that another persona I made up along with Anna. This is Josefina. And so somebody tell Robert that I created stuff instead of recreated stuff. This is entitled Cilantro. Those of you who don't know what that means, it's coriander. But living in this valley, I can't fail to see how you would not know that. I mean, you all hang out at Taco Bell, I know. But they don't use cilantro there. It's against the law to use anything that tastes good at Taco Bell. Heaven forbid they got a real pepper there, you know. The sad part is I go there, you know. They can't do too much of the beans. I mean, you boil the beans in water, and you get beans, right? So I can hang with that, but otherwise they're doing something right, and they're making lots of bucks. Anyhow, this is called Cilantro. And it's another one of these poems that come from nowhere, I guess. Among Josefina's eternal desires forever in their cocoons, confused and forlorn, and in search of light and blossom, desires thickening like algae in the deepening pool of impossibility. Among her desires, one remains loyal and clear as a new moon. It is to have a sarape of warm water and sand, a sarape of kind whispers and ardent stars, a sarape of children's hair and corn silk and mountain wind and nopal, a sarape of no longer dreaming for dreams to come true, a sarape of her 2 or 3 favorite hours, cilantro, and of making love as faithfully as the horizon and the sun, and knowing for once that someone else wishes for the same. Thank you.